thought they were chasing ghosts. Turns out, the ghosts were chasing them. Black Hollow Asylum has stood at the edge of Grady Hollow for nearly a century, abandoned but never empty. Left to rot in 1978, it became a monument to suffering, madness, and the cruelty disguised as treatment. The bell in its tower, once used to mark mealtimes and lights out, hasn't rung in decades. At least, that's what they say. Urban explorer Elias and his friends Callie and Jonah arrive at Black Hollow with cameras in hand, ready to film another viral adventure for their YouTube channel, Phantom Hikers. It's supposed to be simple. Explore the asylum, capture creepy footage, and leave before nightfall. But from the moment they step inside, things feel off. The air is heavy. The silence is too deep. The faint sound of a bell, ding, ding, echoes from somewhere above. It's subtle at first, easy to dismiss, until it isn't. As they climb higher into the asylum, they notice strange markings on the walls. Scratched phrases like, "I hear the bell," and "stay in the light." Doors that should stay closed swing open on their own. A shadow moves at the edge of Callie's flashlight beam. Gone when she looks, but it was there. Then the bell rings again, not soft this time, loud, deep, and it's no longer coming from above. It's closer. They try to leave, but Black Hollow isn't done with them. The stairwells twist in ways they shouldn't. Hallways stretch farther than they did before. The way down leads back to where they started. Somewhere, always just behind them, is the soft, steady sound of footsteps that aren't theirs. Jonah is the first to act strange. His eyes dart toward empty corners. His breathing gets shallow. Then he mutters something Elias will never forget. Do you hear them? One by one, the group begins to unravel, caught in the grip of a place that doesn't just trap the body, it unravels the mind. Callie disappears. Jonah's grin becomes too wide, too wrong, like his face doesn't fit him anymore. And Elias? He's left alone to face the heart of it all, the bell itself. The final bell of Black Hollow still rings. And when it does, you don't answer it. You don't. But Elias answers. The town of Grady Hollow sends search teams 3 days later. They find the van, they find the camera. They don't find Elias, Callie, or Jonah. The last footage on the camera shows Elias staring into the lens, his eyes hollow, his breath fogging the screen. His final words are a warning. Don't come here, they're in the bell, they're in the bell. Then the screen goes black. They say madness doesn't announce itself. It creeps in slow, quiet, like a shadow stretching at dusk. One moment, everything feels normal. The next, you're standing in a place where normal doesn't exist anymore. That's how I like to start this story. Not to scare you, at least not only to scare you, but to warn you. See, most haunted places, they'll spook you a little, maybe send a chill down your spine, but they don't keep you. Black Hollow Asylum is different. It doesn't just scare you, it holds you. I've seen it happen. I've heard it happen. The asylum's been standing on the edge of Grady Hollow for over a century, its stone walls beaten by rain, snow, and time. Built in 1912, they called it a state-of-the-art facility for the mentally infirm. What that really meant was a place where people no one cared about could be put away and forgotten. Electroshock. Ice baths, isolation cells, the kind of treatments that don't heal anyone, they just break them into quieter pieces. By 1978, the state shut it down. Inhumane conditions, they said. But the stories that leaked out after were worse than any official report. Patients disappearing, doctors taking volunteers for after-hours treatments, and that bell. Oh, the bell. At the top of the tower sat the asylum's pride, a massive cast-iron bell. It rang twice a day, every day, for 66 years. Once at 7 a.m. to mark the start of the day, and once at 8 p.m. for lights out. Every patient heard it, every patient hated it. Not because of the sound, but because of what it meant. The bell didn't just mark time, it marked control, it marked silence. When they shut Black Hollow down, they boarded the doors, locked the gates, and left the bell where it hung. They say it never rang again. They say a lot of things, but if you talk to the people in town, the old ones, the ones who still remember the screams that echoed on quiet nights, they'll tell you different. Sometimes, if the wind's just right, you can hear it ringing. Not at 7 a.m., not at 8 p.m., just whenever it wants to. That's where this story begins. Three friends, Elias Margrave, Callie Reed, and Jonah Lang, thought Black Hollow was just another haunted building. They weren't ghost hunters, not really. They were urban explorers, people who break into old places, film the whole thing, and upload it to YouTube for people to watch from their couches. Their channel, Phantom Hikers, had been doing well lately. Old mills, factories, abandoned neighborhoods, the creepier the better. Their most popular videos were always the ones with the title, "We Shouldn't Have Gone In There." People love to watch other people push their luck. This time, they pushed it too far. It started simple, like it always does. The van pulled up to the gravel path just after 5 p.m. The sun was low, burning orange across the tree line, spilling long shadows over the cracked asphalt. The asylum stood ahead of them like a king's tomb, wide, tall, and leaning slightly to one side, its tower clawing at the sky like a broken finger. "Smaller than I thought," Jonah muttered from the passenger seat, his phone already up, recording it. "Smaller?" Callie scoffed as she zipped up her hoodie. "It's 4 stories tall, Jonah. How much bigger do you need it to be?" "Big enough to be scary," Jonah replied, grinning. "It's big enough," Elias said from the driver's seat. He pulled the keys from the ignition, the old van coughing twice before going still. "Don't worry, man, it's big enough." They stepped out, their boots crunching against loose gravel and shards of glass. Elias swung his backpack over his shoulder, already setting up his camera. Callie stretched her arms and glanced up at the bell tower. It loomed higher than she expected, with narrow slats cut into the sides to let in light. Or maybe to let something else out. "You think that thing ever falls?" she asked, nodding toward the bell. "If it was gonna fall, it would have done it by now," Elias said, adjusting his lens. "Don't worry, Callie. Gravity's on your side." "Gravity's on nobody's side," she muttered, but she didn't look away from it. They crossed through the rusted iron gate, ducking under a thick vine that had grown through the bars. Above them, etched into the stone arch, were the words, "Black Hollow Asylum." The letters had eroded over time, but they were still sharp enough to read. The front doors had been torn off long ago, leaving a wide, dark entrance that gaped like a mouth. A cold draft seeped out of it. The smell of rot, mildew, and something faintly metallic followed it. Callie rubbed her arms. "Smells like wet pennies," she said. "Rust," Jonah said, aiming his phone flashlight toward the entrance. "Just rust." "Yeah, sure." She pulled her hoodie tighter. Elias grinned, adjusting his camera's settings. "All right, Callie, hit him with the intro. You know the drill." Callie rolled her eyes but stepped forward, facing the camera like a pro. Her flashlight lit her from below, casting shadows up her face. "Welcome back, Phantom Hikers," she said, her voice playful but steady. "Tonight we've got something special for you. Ever wonder what happens when you step inside a place where people were never meant to leave? Well, we're about to find out." "Love it," Jonah said, giving a thumbs up. Yeah, Callie muttered. "Let's get it over with." The three of them stepped inside together. The cold hit them first. Not like outside cold, inside cold, the kind that creeps in through your clothes and settles on your skin. Their breath came out in little clouds, floating in front of them before vanishing. "Why is it colder in here than outside?" Callie asked, her eyes darting to the ceiling like she expected to see vents. "Stone walls," Elias said, focusing his camera on the long, empty hallway ahead of them. "No insulation. This place soaks up cold like a sponge." The main hall split into 3 paths. One led deeper into the first-floor wards, one to the kitchen and utility areas, and one to a rusted stairwell leading up. "Which way?" Callie asked, her flashlight swinging left and right. Up, Elias said, nodding toward the stairs. Better views from higher up. We'll do the basement last. Basement? Jonah frowned. Nobody said anything about a basement, man. Every asylum has a basement, Jonah, Callie teased. Don't be soft. Basements are where it happens, Callie, Jonah muttered, stepping toward the stairs. Don't act like you don't know that. Their footsteps echoed as they climbed, each step making the metal stair groan under their weight. Callie trailed behind, turning once to shine her flashlight down the hall below. It stretched on longer than it should have. Her brows pulled together, but she didn't say anything. They reached the second floor. Long hallway. Rows of patient rooms, each with a narrow observation slot on the doors. You guys smell that? Callie wrinkled her nose. Smells like iron, Elias muttered, lifting his camera. Like blood. Don't say that, Jonah hissed, looking over his shoulder. Seriously, man. They walked slowly, scanning each door. Most were closed. Some were open. Just a crack, not wide enough to see inside. None of you better touch those, Callie muttered, eyeing the doors. I'm serious. No one's touching anything, Elias replied. And that's when they heard it. Ding, ding. A soft bell, faint and distant. All three of them stopped. Did you hear that? Callie whispered, her voice tight. Jonah nodded, eyes wide. Yeah, he said, his voice barely a breath. Yeah, I heard it. The first bell had rung, and it wouldn't be the last. Fear doesn't show up all at once. It creeps. It builds. At first, the air inside Black Hollow was just cold. Then it became heavy. Not in a way you could see, but in a way you could feel. It pressed down on their chests, slowed their breathing. Every step they took felt like walking uphill, like the building itself didn't want them there. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, Callie muttered as they moved through the second-floor hallway. I already hate this place. Jonah glanced at her, forcing a grin. You always say that. Yeah, well, this time I mean it. Her flashlight beam swept over the row of heavy steel doors, each one with an observation slot just big enough to peek through. The light bounced off something shiny in one of the open cells. She stopped walking. Wait! She tilted her head, squinting. What is that? What's what? Elias asked, turning his camera toward her. Shiny thing, she said, stepping closer. Her flashlight caught it again, a sliver of something metallic glinting from inside the open doorway of a patient's cell. Don't go in there, Jonah muttered, eyes wide. Come on, Callie. I'm just looking, she shot back, creeping forward. Her flashlight swept the small room, revealing a simple, empty cot bolted to the wall. The shiny thing was a small metal button lying on the floor, half covered in dust. She crouched down to get a better look. Looks like a button, she said, confused, like from a jacket or a uniform. Cool, Callie. You solved the mystery, Jonah muttered, tapping his phone. Now get out of there. Relax, she said, brushing dust from the button with her fingertips. She turned it over and froze. There was something scratched into the back of it. Just one word. Stay. Her heart kicked once, hard, like she'd tripped on a stair. Callie stood up fast, wiping her hands on her jeans like she'd touched something unclean. She didn't say a word about it. Find your treasure? Elias asked, adjusting the focus on his camera. Yeah, Callie muttered, not looking at him. Just dust and junk. Let's go. But as she walked past the observation slot of the next door, she glanced through it, and something glanced back. It was fast, a flash of movement, like something shifting out of view. Her flashlight whipped toward it, but there was nothing there, just the inside of another empty room. Her breath caught in her throat. Callie? Elias said, noticing her pause. You good? She blinked hard, rubbing her eyes. Yeah, she said quickly. Yeah, I'm fine. Let's keep moving. But she didn't glance into any more observation slots after that. The third floor felt worse than the second. The air smelled stronger, like metal, like copper. It burned the back of their throats. Jonah kept sniffing, wiping his nose on his sleeve. This place stinks, man. Smells like a busted pipe. Probably just old plumbing, Elias said. But he didn't believe it. Callie didn't say anything. She kept glancing over her shoulder like she was expecting to see someone behind them. "Yo, let me get a shot of this," Jonah said, pointing his phone at the wall. The words "I hear the bell" were scratched into the plaster. They weren't painted, they weren't graffiti, they were carved. Small, jagged letters, like someone had spent a long time digging them in. "Cool," Jonah said, crouching down to film it from below. "This is perfect thumbnail material." Callie frowned. "That's not graffiti, Jonah. Somebody carved that in." "Yeah, I know. Makes it creepier." "Jonah," she said sharply, her tone colder now. "It's not graffiti." Jonah glanced up at her, still grinning, but when he saw her face, the grin faded. "Okay," he muttered, standing up. "Okay, yeah, you're right, it's weird." But they didn't leave. They didn't even slow down. They reached the nurse's station at the center of the hall, a small circular desk surrounded by broken chairs. Callie leaned on the counter, rubbing her arms, her face tense. "All right," Elias said, tapping his camera. "Callie, give us the halfway point recap." She didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the hallway behind them. "Callie?" She blinked and looked at him. "What?" "Halfway point recap," he said, forcing a grin. "Tell the viewers how creepy it is so they stick around for part 2. "Yeah, okay," she muttered, stepping in front of the camera. She forced a smile, but her eyes darted to the hallway every few seconds. "All right, so we're on the 3rd floor of Black Hollow, and it's exactly as bad as I expected. Doors that open on their own, weird carvings on the walls, smells like old pennies and something I don't want to name." She glanced back over her shoulder. "I'd say 10 out of 10 on the nope scale. Would not recommend." Elias chuckled. "Nice. Genuine fear. Viewers love that." "Shut up, Elias," she muttered, rubbing her arms again. Yeah, he said, swinging his camera toward the hallway. "All right, next stop, the bell tower." The stairwell to the bell tower was different from the others. It was narrow, tight, barely wide enough for one person at a time. The air was colder here, each breath coming out in white puffs. "This feels like a mistake," Jonah muttered, his voice low. His phone light wavered as he looked behind them. "Feels wrong, man." "Don't start with that," Elias muttered, one hand on the rail. "It's just tight spaces. It messes with your head." "Yeah," Jonah said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Almost there," Elias said, his breath short. "Feels like we've been climbing forever," Callie muttered from below. "How many floors does this place have?" 4, Elias replied. "You know that." "Then why does it feel like 6? He asked, panting. Elias didn't have an answer for that. At the top of the stairs, the iron door to the bell tower was closed. The brass plaque next to it read, "Bell Tower Access, Staff Only." The door looked heavier than the others, like it had been built to keep something in. "Here we go," Elias muttered, gripping the cold metal handle. It squealed as he turned it. The bell tower was wide open, exposed to the night air. The slats in the walls let in pale moonlight, lighting up the massive bell in the center of the room. It hung from a thick chain, its surface coated in rust. "Holy!" Jonah's voice trailed off as he stepped inside, his phone aimed upward. "This thing's huge." "Bigger than it looked outside," Callie muttered. Elias walked in slowly, his eyes on the bell. It swayed, just a little, not enough to ring, not enough to be noticed, but enough. "Wind," Jonah muttered, stepping next to him. "There's no wind," Callie replied, her voice soft but sharp. Elias checked his camera. Still recording, still fine, but he heard it now, a sound behind the hum of the wind, soft tapping, tap, 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 like fingers on glass. His chest tightened. He turned slowly. The doorway was empty. The stairwell was empty, but it didn't feel empty. Callie's breath hitched. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, her voice almost too soft to hear. Elias nodded. Jonah didn't answer. And then the bell rang. The sound shook the air. Callie dropped her flashlight. Jonah clapped his hands to his ears, his eyes squeezed shut. Elias stumbled back, eyes locked on the bell. It wasn't swaying anymore. It was still, completely still. "Who rang it?" Jonah gasped, his voice trembling. "Elias," Callie's voice was sharp with fear. "Who rang it?" But Elias didn't answer, because he didn't know. Fear can make a man freeze, but terror makes you move, even when you don't know where you're running to. The bell's deep, hollow bong still echoed through the air, like the sound had become part of the atmosphere itself. It wasn't fading, it was growing. Elias pressed his hands against his ears, his jaw clenched tight, teeth grinding. His bones vibrated with the sound, each chime rattling through his skull. Beside him, Jonah was doubled over, face twisted in pain, his phone forgotten on the ground. Callie crouched low, her eyes squeezed shut, her lips moving like she was whispering something to herself. But the bell didn't stop. Bong! It was louder now, closer. Elias blinked through the pain, forcing himself to stand. The bell hung still in its frame, heavy and unmoving, but the sound wasn't coming from it. It was coming from all around them. "Callie!" he shouted, his voice straining against the roar of the bell. "We have to go!" She didn't answer. Her hands were over her ears, her head down. "Callie!" he shouted again, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her to her feet. She looked at him, dazed, like she didn't know where she was. Her eyes darted around the room, wide with panic. "Where is it coming from?" she gasped, tears streaking her face. "It's not the bell, Elias. It's not bong." She jerked like she'd been struck, her body twisting, legs giving out beneath her. Elias caught her before she hit the floor. "Come on, Callie. Stay with me. Stay with me." He turned toward Jonah. "Jonah, get up, man. We're leaving." Jonah didn't move. He was facing the bell. His arms hung limp at his sides, his head tilted to the right, neck at an angle that wasn't quite right. "Jonah," Elias called. Jonah's shoulders rose and fell with shallow breaths, his back still to them. Slowly his head moved, tilting to the left, his neck bending with an awful, slow creak. His head rolled too far, chin almost touching his shoulder. Elias's breath caught in his throat. "Jonah," he said again, his voice cracking. "Come on, man. Don't do this." Jonah's head snapped back to center, fast and sharp, like a marionette string had been yanked. Slowly, so slowly, he turned his face toward them. His eyes were wrong. The whites of his eyes were gone, swallowed by the black. No pupils, no irises. Just two wide, empty voids staring at them. His mouth twitched once, then twice, then it pulled into a grin too wide for his face, his lips stretching past what skin should allow. "Jonah?" Callie's voice was small now, like a child's. Jonah opened his mouth, but it wasn't his voice that came out. It was calm, measured, familiar. "You hear it too, don't you?" Callie screamed. "Move!" Elias roared, yanking Callie to her feet. "Run! Go!" They bolted for the stairwell. Their boots slammed against the stone floor, each step an explosion of sound in the hollow tower. Elias didn't dare look back, but he heard Jonah's footsteps behind them. Not running, walking, steady, deliberate. Step, step, step. The metallic clang of the iron hatch echoed as they reached the top of the stairwell. Elias wrenched it open, nearly tearing it off its hinges. Callie was already halfway down the spiral staircase, her breathing rapid, sharp, desperate. "Don't look back," Elias muttered to himself as he climbed in after her, slamming the hatch shut behind him. "Don't look back." But he looked back. Through the narrow crack of the hatch, he saw Jonah, standing at the top of the bell tower, still, silent, his face tilted downward, his eyes, those empty black eyes, locked directly on Elias. Jonah's grin stretched wider, his lips split, the skin pulling too far, tearing at the corners, too wide, too sharp. his head tilted slowly to one side, just a little too far. And then Jonah did something Elias would never forget. He raised one hand and waved. "Nope," Elias growled, turning and practically throwing himself down the stairwell. Callie was below him, her flashlight bouncing wildly as she half ran, half fell down the spiral steps. "Don't stop!" he yelled. "Don't stop! Don't stop! Don't stop!" But Callie did stop. She froze halfway down, gasping like she'd been punched in the stomach. "Callie, move!" Elias shouted, skidding to a stop just behind her. He grabbed her arm, but she didn't move. Her eyes were wide, locked on something below them. Her face had gone pale, her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Callie!" He shook her, snapping her out of it. "What is it?" Her eyes met his. Her lips trembled. "They're coming up!" Her voice didn't sound like her voice anymore. Elias turned, aiming his flashlight down the stairwell. The beam stretched down, far longer than it should have. The stairs spiraled forever. Too far, much too far. And from that impossible darkness below, something was moving. Not one thing, not two, dozens. They crawled, some using hands and feet, others dragging themselves like broken animals. Shadows, pale limbs flashing in and out of the beam of light. Faces, grinning faces. "Oh God!" Elias gasped, his breath short, sharp, fast. "Oh God, no, no, no! Go!" Callie screamed, shoving him forward. "Move! Go! Go! Go!" They ran, faster this time. No hesitation, no words, no thoughts except one, "Get out!" But the stairwell was different now. The more they ran, the longer it seemed. Steps that should have taken them to the next landing just didn't. The air grew thicker, heavier, like walking through wet concrete. "Where's the exit?" Callie shouted, eyes wild. "It should be right here!" "I know," Elias barked, turning the flashlight toward the walls. They were closer than before, tighter. His heart pounded, sweat soaked his back, his lungs burned. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the tower. Every breath hurt. Ding, ding. The bell rang again, but it wasn't coming from above anymore. It was coming from right behind them. "Ding! Ding!" Callie screamed. "Run faster!" Elias's legs ached. His body begged him to stop, but he didn't, couldn't. The sound of footsteps was behind them now, but it wasn't just footsteps. It was running. Thud, 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 thud. "No, no, no, no!" Callie screamed, practically throwing herself forward. Her foot caught on a loose tile. She fell, hitting the stairs hard. "Callie!" Elias reached for her, but it was too late. Her flashlight rolled. The beam caught her face for just a second. Her eyes were wide with terror, her arms reaching for him. "Don't let them take me!" Then she was pulled backward into the dark. "Callie!" Elias screamed, his voice raw, cracking like broken glass. He scrambled forward, hands clawing at the spot where she'd vanished. He shoved his flashlight down into the stairwell, but there was no sign of her. Nothing but empty stairs. "No!" he gasped, eyes wild, chest heaving. "No, Callie!" His scream echoed down the endless stairs. It came back to him quieter. "Callie! Callie! Callie!" Then something whispered up from below. A voice. Her voice. "Elias!" It called softly. So soft. Too soft. His heart stopped. He leaned forward, breath caught in his chest. "Callie!" he whispered, his voice shaking. "Is that you?" Silence. Then from the darkness, a single clear sound. Knock. Knock. The knock echoed up from below, and then her voice, only it wasn't hers anymore. "I hear the bell, Elias." Bong. People think the end of a story is where everything gets explained, but not all stories are that kind. Some endings don't come with answers, just echoes that follow you home. Elias didn't remember running. Not really. All he knew was that his legs moved before his mind caught up. His feet pounded the metal steps of the stairwell, his breath sharp, shallow, painful. His chest burned like his lungs had been set on fire, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Behind him, the footsteps were faster, louder. Too many of them. They clattered and thudded, hands and feet slapping against stone and metal in uneven rhythms. Crawling, climbing, chasing. "Don't look back," he gasped. His throat was dry, his tongue heavy in his mouth. "Don't look back. Don't look back. Don't look." "Elias." His heart nearly stopped. It was Callie's voice. It wasn't distant this time. It was right behind him. He knew it wasn't her. He knew it, but knowing didn't matter. His head still snapped around before he could stop himself. Something was there, not Callie. It was crouched on all fours like a starving animal. Its arms and legs were too long, fingers splayed wide on the steps. Its face was worse. It looked like Callie. Her eyes, her mouth, her hair hanging wild and loose over her face. But it wasn't her. Her face didn't smile like that. Her eyes didn't stare that wide. Her grin didn't stretch that far. "Stay with us, Elias," it whispered, head tilting so far it was nearly upside down. Her black eyes never blinked, never blinked. "We're almost home." "No!" Elias roared, spinning away so fast he nearly tripped. He scrambled down the steps, his hands slapping the cold iron rail. His legs felt like they were made of lead, but he didn't stop. Run, run, run. The hallway at the bottom of the stairs stretched ahead of him like a tunnel that wouldn't end. The air shimmered. The walls swayed like he was looking through heat waves. No more turns, no more choices, just forward. He sprinted. The air grew colder with every step. His breath came out in foggy puffs, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. His eyes darted from wall to wall. Each door he passed was slightly ajar, each one cracked just wide enough for someone or something to peek through. He didn't look. He didn't dare look. "Elias!" Her voice echoed from one of the doors. He heard her footsteps, slow and soft, like bare feet on tile. He squeezed his eyes shut as he ran. "She's not real. She's not real. She's not real." But then another sound came from ahead. Ding, ding. His heart lurched. The bell. But it wasn't coming from the tower this time. It was ahead of him, directly ahead. "No!" he gasped, shaking his head as he ran. "No! No! No! No!" The hallway bent. Not a corner, not a turn. It just bent, curved, like the world had folded in on itself. His feet slammed against the floor, each step harder than the last. He was running in a circle. "No!" he screamed, voice echoing back at him. "No! No! No!" The sound wasn't just his own. His legs buckled. He staggered, palms slamming against the wall for balance. He sucked in air like a drowning man, his eyes darting around wildly. He knew this place. He'd been here before. It was the hallway from the second floor, the same stretch of doors, the same observation slots. His flashlight flickered in his hand, buzzing like it was full of static. He slapped it once, twice, but it only flickered more. Bang! The door nearest him shuddered. Hard. His breath caught in his throat. Bang! The slot on the door snapped open. A single wide black eye stared at him through the slot. The grin came next, lips pressing against the edge of the slot, curling wide. So wide. "Elias!" the voice whispered. Not Callie this time. Not Jonah. His own voice. "Get out of my head!" Elias roared, slamming his fist against the door. The face vanished, but he could hear it laughing on the other side. Low, raspy laughter, soft but close. He stumbled back from the door. His breath came in short, ragged gasps. He didn't know where to run anymore. Every hallway looked the same. Every door was slightly open. His eyes darted left, then right. He spun around, disoriented, lost, trapped. Ding, ding. He froze. The bell. It wasn't faint anymore. It wasn't distant. It was right above him, directly above him. His flashlight flickered, buzzed, then went out. Total darkness. No! he whispered, voice small, broken. His hands trembled as he pressed them against the wall, his fingers scraping the cold stone. His chest heaved with panic. "You're almost home, Elias." The voice came from all directions at once, soft, calm, familiar. "Please," Elias gasped, tears spilling down his face. "Please, just let me out. Stay with us." Ding, ding. The air shifted. He felt it, something moving behind him. No footsteps, no breathing, just presence. Slow, quiet, deliberate. He didn't turn around. "Don't," he whispered. The cold breath brushed the back of his neck. He froze. The hands came next. Thin, cold fingers settled gently on his shoulders, not clawing, not pulling, just holding him still. He opened his mouth to scream, but nothing came out. His breath caught in his throat like a stone. The voice was in his ear now, calm, so calm. "I hear the bell, Elias." His mind shattered. 3 days later, when the search party found the van, it was parked exactly where Elias had left it. The doors were unlocked, camera equipment still in the back seat, engine cold. The police combed the asylum. First floor, second, third, the bell tower. They didn't find Elias. They didn't find Callie. They didn't find Jonah, but they found the camera. It was on the second floor, lying on its side, still recording. The last 5 minutes of footage were nothing but static, interrupted only once. A sharp image, like a frame caught mid-glitch. It showed Elias's face. He was staring directly into the camera. His eyes were wide. His pupils were gone. His eyes black as tar. His mouth was open, teeth bared, lips pulled too wide in a smile that wasn't his. Behind him there were faces, dozens, no eyes, just grins, grins too wide to be human. The static returned and so did the sound. Ding, ding. Not loud, not soft, just steady. It echoed for 6 seconds before the video cut to black. If you ever hear a bell ringing where no bell should be, don't follow it. Don't try to find it. Don't even ask where it's coming from. The bell isn't calling for you to come closer. It's calling for you to stay.